Let's just check this is working as intended. Let's see. All right, so we already have 5 people that are connected. Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started in the next couple minutes. For those that are joining us, feel free to drop in the chat where you're joining us from. That is great. Hi, Raymond. Welcome. All right. So we'll just give a couple more minutes for everyone to start joining us, and then we'll get started. And I'm here joined, I'll introduce them in a minute, but with Tunde and Teva, who I'm going to present very shortly. All right. Raymond joining us from Bali, Indonesia. All right. Sounds good. So, all right, we have Joseph from Ethiopia. Welcome, Joseph. Thank you for joining us. So people are starting to trickle in, which is great. As I said, in the next minutes, we'll get started with the introduction and we'll move forward. So Tunde and Teva, I'll just put you on a brief hold and I'll bring you back in the next couple minutes. All right, welcome Al Nelson from Kenya. Welcome Amadou from Senegal. Thank you for joining us, guys. Alrighty, so it is time for us to get started. I know more people will join us, but this is a great starting point for us. So welcome everybody. My name is Anthony, and I'm the co-founder and chief product officer at Daba. Before we get started, I just want to tell you a little bit more what we do at Daba. So Daba is a unified investment platform for Africa. We make it easy for investors of all levels to find the best investment opportunities across the continent, across a variety of asset classes, ranging from stocks, startups, and investment strategies. Once again, thank you for joining us. If you want to learn more about Daba, feel free to scan the QR code and you'll be able to have access to the application and more details. The topics for today's session is InsurTech in Africa and how InsurTech is increasing accessibility in Africa. So for today's agenda, we're going to start by introducing the panelists. I'll give you a few data points about InsurTech in Africa, and then we'll open it up the conversation. We've prepared a few questions for our panelists today, and then we'll let you, the spectators, ask and engage question with our panel, and then we'll leave it up for closing remarks. We are still waiting for 2 speakers, 2 panelists that are going to join us very soon. We're waiting to hear from them. But what we will do now, we have already Teva and Tunde with us. So what I'll do is I'll bring them on the stage with me. And okay, Elias is here. So all right, Elias, you're fantastic. Great. Amazing. Elias, perhaps if you could just turn on your camera, that would be fantastic. With that being said, I'm going to start bringing up the first panelist to introduce himself and tell us a little bit more in a minute or so what he's doing. So I would like to welcome Tunde first on stage. Tunde, the stage is yours.
Okay, thanks, Anthony. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Tunde. Foundationally, I trained as a physician but I find myself to be on the insurance side of the fence for close to 2 decades now, going 18 years or thereabout. And I like to describe what we do as connecting the dots within insurance, healthcare, and technology. Our focal point is to see how we can accelerate inclusion and deepen penetration. Hence the birth of our startup, which we call Hadiel. Hadiel is actually a health cooperative. We essentially we're using technology to chop up traditional health insurance benefits and plans into bite sizes. And though that's what we're doing, we do not administer as a conventional insurance company because we're not an insurance company. And with that, our goal is to see how we can cover 1 billion Africans over the next 25 years, right? And it's a pleasure to be here. I think enough said about me. I'll hand over back to Anthony. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tunde. And perhaps where are you joining us from? You didn't mention that. So for everyone who is listening in, so they know where you are.
All right, great. Currently Lagos.
All right. Let's Giddy in the house. Amazing. Thank you, Tunde. I'll bring on our next panelists, Teva. So Teva, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Same, tell us where you're based, what you're currently doing, and what is WiAssur currently working on in a minute and a half.
Okay, so I'll be very brief. Hello, everybody. Thanks, Anthony, for inviting me and the rest of the panelists to an interesting subject. So WiAssur is a digital insurance broker serving direct B2B and B2C customer for any type of insurance product, but also
I don't know if it's just me. Seems like it's frozen. Can anyone hear me? Teva, I think you might have frozen. So I'll just give you a minute. And what I'll do is I'll bring on Elias and then we'll switch back to Teva if he cannot make it. So let's do that. Hi, Elias.
Hi.
I know Teva is having a few technical difficulties, so we'll get him back in a minute. But I would love to introduce you, Elias. So please, could you tell us where you're based and what you're currently doing and supporting at FSD Africa?
Yeah, I'm currently based in Nairobi, the headquarters of FSD Africa, which is a development agency looking at transforming financial markets in the continent by making finance work for Africa's future. Yeah, I work at FSD Africa. I lead programs around innovation for resilience, whereby I lead development and implementation of programs that work to improve enabling environment for risk markets in Africa that looks into driving what we call systemic change in the market for insurance and other risk transfer instruments in Africa. So with this, then my work predominantly looks at how then do we enable innovation to be entrenched, not only within the regulations, but also to support the market system in terms of looking at the InsurTech ecosystem, new insurance components that will provide access to insurance solutions, both to communities and also small businesses that are highly exposed, particularly when it comes to issues around the protection gap. At FSD Africa, we look at how then these systems we can enable these financial systems to support in building a sustainable future for the continent. So my work is predominantly working with institutions that are looking to creating this change to build resilience and to close the ever-widening protection gap. So other than that, I've been within the insurance space for the last 10 years. where I've been working on development and implementation of risk-based regulations, supporting market innovation by designing and testing innovative mechanisms for risk management through formulations of different programs across Africa. And the most entrenched program that I would basically mention is the BIMALAB InsurTech Acceleration Program that we've been running with FSD Africa for the last 3 years. And we are looking into really supporting the InsurTech ecosystem and connecting that ecosystem to solve the challenges that are currently impacting the InsurTech space in terms of how then do we provide them with technical support, how then do we enable them to gain rightful partnerships, how then do we enable them to access funding, and also just create an enabling regulatory environment for them to scale and provide the solutions within the risk ecosystem. So that's in essence what we do, and it's great to be in this discussion. I'm looking forward to deliberate and discuss how we can increase accessibility, particularly within this particular continent. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you, Elias, for joining us. Your perspective is going to be very, very interesting. You working with both regulatory and with innovators is going to be really interesting to hear what you have to say and what you've seen and what you keep seeing as the main challenges. And we'll dive into the conversation in the next couple minutes. So thank you for your introduction. I'm just going to bring back Teva for a minute because I know he was not able to fully introduce himself, and then we'll jump right in. Teva, here you are.
Okay, thank you. Thank you again. I don't know where it got frozen, so hi, everybody. So I'm the founder and CEO of WiAssur, which is a digital insurance brokerage company based originally in Côte d'Ivoire and actually expanding to other countries in West Africa, so Ghana, Senegal, Togo, and Benin very soon. So we've built a platform aggregating all insurance products and all risk holders on the market to allow basically any individuals or any companies to ask for a quote online and then to subscribe in a very frictionless experience, and also allow third parties such as other brokers, agents, or third parties had to sell insurance embedded in their core services or products. So yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for joining us, Teva. All right. We are still waiting for Abdullahi to join. We'll see if he's going to join us shortly. What I would like to do next is, as mentioned, so for those who just joined us, now I'm going to cover a little bit of data points for everyone to know, and just to break the ice for everyone to understand why this is such an important and relevant topic, especially when we're talking about insurance in Africa. Before we get started, there's a term that will be used quite often during this conversation, and the term is insurance premiums. So for those who are not familiar with what that means, an insurance premium is simply the amount of money that you pay for an insurance policy. So I wanted to make sure everyone is familiar with the term. Now, let's start with some very, very interesting data points and, to get into the heart of this conversation. So just to start with Nigeria, 95% of people in Nigeria have to access healthcare via out-of-pocket. So meaning that they're going to spend directly their money and they don't have any insurance that's going to pay them back for their access to healthcare. So next up, this is a really incredible fact, but not in the good way, because this is the lowest. Africa has the lowest, or one of the lowest, insurance penetration in the world. Only 3% of insurance penetration. We have only 3% of insurance penetration in Africa, which is quite very, very little to say the least. Now, talking about, now we have an understanding that we have only 3% penetration in Africa. So in this 3%, now what we have to think is that 70% of the premiums, of the insurance premiums, actually are coming by South Africa, which is the largest and most established insurance market on the continent. And then, sure, Africa has a very low insurance penetration rate, but that being said, it is also a very exciting opportunity that is projected to grow to $116 billion by 2027. So there's a lot of entrepreneurs, of companies that are looking to tap into this opportunity to help and accelerate the insurance penetration on the continent. And one last key fact, perhaps, there are 7 countries that represent 83% of the premiums, and the main countries, I know we already spoke about South Africa, but you also have Kenya, Egypt, Nigeria, Algeria, Namibia, and Tunisia. And I'm sure Teva is working hard to add Côte d'Ivoire to this list very soon. And last, what I want to leave you with is this chart. This is really to show that there is innovation that is going on the continent. Once again, this chart specifically is from 2021, so it might not be the most up-to-date. I already know for sure that Ivory Coast has more than one today, one InsurTech company working to help drive and increase the insurance penetration. I hope everyone can see it well. But South Africa, Kenya, and Nigeria are leading the pack. South Africa accounting for 70% of insurance premiums. It is quite to be expected. But as you've seen, among the countries that are leading adoption for insurance, you have also Kenya, Nigeria, and Egypt as well is coming in. So now that you have a little bit more information about the insurance in general in Africa, we're going to jump right into the conversation. And this is the first question that we have prepared for our panelists. So what I'll do is I'll bring one at a time on board to answer this specific question. So the question here is, insurance technology is undoubtedly helping to increase insurance penetration in Africa. How would you assess the stage the industry is at currently? I think I would love to hear from, first of all, the entrepreneurs to have a visual of their take on their local markets, as well as perhaps on the other markets that they're looking to expand to. And then we'd love to have Elias kind of macro perspective at large, perhaps over the continent, onto how this is currently the stage we're currently in. So I would like to bring Teva to get us started, and then I'll bring Tunde. So Teva, I'm going to bring you in right now. Can you hear us?
So thanks. And just to answer your question, so like you said, penetration rate is very low on the continent and has been like that for quite a bit of time. Although we're observing a big growth for almost 20 years in West Africa, as I know, but the economy has itself been growing rapidly in parallel. So penetration rate itself hasn't moved a lot. So I think that's because big players didn't tap in the potential yet. They just scratched the surface. And undoubtedly, like you said, digital is a solution, as it will impact reachability and costs of product by leveraging all the chain of value of insurance, from distribution to management, also in operation and risk assessments. So I think we have a mature industry thanks to internet, smartphone, and new payment means, but that needs to be driven by tech-enabled companies through the whole chain value of insurance.
And thank you for that, Teva. And I guess the question is, you touched on West Africa. For those who know, West Africa is, every specific country has, is very different from one another. Perhaps in your case, in Côte d'Ivoire, how would you say, what does it look like? What does this landscape look like in terms of how evolved is the industry of insurance at this point in time?
So I think in Côte d'Ivoire, it's maybe among the most advanced with the highest penetration rate and average insurance premium per capita that we have. But so I guess Senegal and Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana and Nigeria may be the more matured. But like I said, I think it's market that still need to be tapped and not controlled, but understood by all players. So yeah, I guess we're looking at a more and more mature market but that kind of evolves at different speed. If you look at products, if you look at branches, or if you look at company, or if you look at tech.
Got it. Thank you, Teva. I will bring on Tunde now to hear what his perspective is. So I'm gonna take him on stage right now. Tunde, can you hear us?
Yeah, shoot. Anthony, I'm with you.
We can hear you great. Fantastic.
Awesome.
So
Right.
what is your take on the current stage of the industry?
Okay. So, thanks, Anthony. To continue from where Teva stopped, I'll start by saying that, when you look at the whole ecosystem, collectively, when you want to start from looking at the fintech space, you want to look back at the last 3 to 5 years and how that space has evolved very rapidly in Africa. Why? Because financial inclusion seeks to create products and services for the underserved and the unserved, for that matter. So we find ourselves in a situation where the same segmentation is where the underinsured and the uninsured market actually lies. So that sweet spot, where you have an intersection of financial services colliding with financial services like insurance, colliding with technology, right? That's where you're finding that, they're beginning to be massive shifts, particularly the role that technology is playing to unlock new economies and birth new value chains, right? And as of today, when I look back, okay, so let me start from the outside inward. When we look at statistically what the data available out there, which we actually also do track, we saw that in 2021, on a global perspective, I think we recorded a funding of about 15.5 billion US dollars in the InsurTech space. And coming down to Africa, the data was about 39.7 million, right, in 2021. Now, if we want to look at it from the Nigerian perspective, it was a very, slow year because we had shy of about 1 million USDs in terms of funding coming to Nigeria, right, which accounted for just about less than 0.5% of the total 1.7 billion US dollars funding that came into the fintech space. Well, fast forward to 2022, that narrative really changed, right? Now there was a slowing down, and the global InsurTech space recorded about 8 billion US dollars, and the portion that came to Africa was 63 million US dollars, and Nigeria, yeah, and Nigeria was came up with about 46.25 million US dollars out of that pocket. Now, so we saw a lip transition from 2021 to 2023 from less than 0.5% to about 3.8%, right, in 2022. Now, with the projections and permutations of what we're seeing, 2023, looking at Q1 already, looks like we're on track to hitting maybe times 1.5x of what happened last year, depending on what happens in quarter 2, 3, and 4. But with quarter 1 already, we're recording about almost 20 million US dollars flowing into the African environment. So bringing it all home together, what we're seeing a stage where, despite the things that happened last year, where there was a turn down and slowing in funding, there's likely to still be that upward trajectory growth, right? And between now and 2025, if we're looking at what is projected data-wise, specifically from McKinsey, saying there's going to be an annual growth revenue, compounded growth annual revenue of about 7%. Looks like we'll continue to record those numbers in double digits in terms of growth. And we should be seeing what's going to happen in terms of Africa's InsurTech ecosystem birthing unicorns to join the global stage. I'll just pause there.
Fantastic. That was a lot to take in. Main takeaways, there's a lot more funding coming into the InsurTech space in Africa, and especially in Nigeria. So thank you for those nuggets. I'll bring on right now Elias to tell us a little bit more about the macro perspective of the insurance and InsurTech space, and what stage you think we are in currently in this industry?
Yeah. You kind of mentioned quite alarming numbers, and ideally, that basically presents opportunities that the continent should be able to take up. But the biggest question to us is that as we talk about technology really helping to increase insurance penetration in Africa, the question is, what are these elements that are kind of inhibiting this penetration? And there are three things that we would basically talk about. So, for instance, there's low demand for risk transfer solutions in the continent of Africa. Also, there are issues around supply. So, in terms of low quality supply of these particular solutions, and that is also encumbered by what we call quite restrictive regulatory environments. And once you bring those three factors together, then there's need to look at how then we unlock this issue. So, for instance, we talk about supply. On the supply side, are we able to get products that do resonate and meet the needs of people? And that basically means that there's need to think about developing products that would resonate and correspond to the needs of various persons in the continent, but also the businesses that they are currently undertaking. And that could span from how do we affordability, issues of trust, issues of irregular payments of premiums. And if you bring all those factors together, the key element that would support those particular challenges is innovation. At the same time, we are looking at this on the demand side. Again, how then do we enable people and their businesses to demand for these particular solutions? And that basically means that we need to think about technology in one or the other. At the same time, then there's need to discuss regulations, because insurance markets is quite restrictive in terms of the entry. You need to have a good amount of capital to get into the market, and that's what really hampers InsurTechs and micro insurers that might want to operate within that particular space that has not been touched at all. So with all these issues, then technology can really play a critical role of unlocking these three challenges that I kind of put out to really increase the penetration, which currently is less than 3%, to what would we term as the world average of around 7%. So ideally, to get at the world average, we need to have another increase of around 4% of insurance penetration in the continent. So that there are various ways that then what we need to do. And I've seen in terms of the way we bring technology within the insurance value chain. Again, in the continent, we are only addressing one element around the insurance value chain. It's more on the distribution side. It's more on the distribution side, and maybe we might need to upscale this. Can we connect it to the claim side, which can unlock issues around trust for people to trust these particular products? Can we pay insurance claims quite quickly? And that can also be unlocked through technology. Can we bring technology to enable us to do proper underwriting that will increase issues of affordability and kind of enable us to create products that will be so specific to the needs that we have? So in terms of increasing the rating levels through use of technology, are we also going to enable the people to really pause and unpause insurance solutions whenever they have needs for this particular product? So there are many ways that we really need to complement technology across the insurance value chain, but also importantly, we need to look at how then we address those three issues that are really a bigger an issue that have kind of inhibited the growth of insurance penetration in the continent.
And you've touched on really three important pillars that actually are the perfect segue to our next question. So thank you for elaborating on that. So just to summarize it here, the main challenges are that need to be addressed by companies looking to increase the insurance penetration on the continent is, first of all, being able to understand, assess how much demand is there for insurance products. Number two, what is the product, the variety of products offered, and are these product offering tailored to the people who need it, which is really important. And three, how does this work from with the regulatory framework? There are some restrictions and some regulations to follow. So understanding how the regulatory framework works and adapt to it to each, I would assume, each geography, because each African country has a different regulatory framework in order to increase the insurance penetration. So I hope I summarized your points well. But this is a really great segue to the next question, which I would like for you to start, and then I would like to bring on Teva and Elias to answer. Is, you've mentioned a lot of the things that these companies should do and the main points to look into. But now, what have you seen? What are the companies that you've seen that have some of the most innovative InsurTech solutions out there? And just before you answer, I know we've gotten a question from Stephen Brand that we'll address in a minute. If Tunde, Teva, or Elias have the answer to this question, just keep it on pause. We'll get to it as we get to the Q&A session. For you, Stephen, we'll do it in a minute. So going back to you, Elias, what have you seen as the most innovating solution addressing and tackling all the points that you've mentioned before?
Yeah, so ideally, I'll kind of look at it from what is the most compelling need that the continent really requires. And if you look at the African continent, we are highly dependent on climate and nature. Ideally, it's estimated that close to 10% of the GDP, if we don't really address some of these particular challenges, we might lose up to around 30% of the African GDP by 2050. So ideally, we need to think about solutions that will tend to address these key issues. So for instance, are we able to address issues around climate? Are we able to address issues around health that has really impacted the continent? So in terms of some of the innovative InsurTech solutions that I've seen solutions that are looking into providing coverage for smallholder farmers across the continent, which becomes a major driver of the economy. So a couple of companies, a couple of InsurTechs have been in that particular space. You can to mention the likes of Pula, the likes of Ake Africa across the continent are trying to address issues around climate change and climate risks that do impact different countries. We've seen organizations such as African Risk Capacity, again, trying to really work with these InsurTechs and different sovereign states to solve risks around climate. But also on the long end, we've seen a lot of health solutions that are required. So in terms of really providing healthcare solutions. So for instance, I'll mention a company in Kenya called Teva that basically looks at providing medical solutions or to the lowest of the pyramid within that particular ecosystem to solve these healthcare needs that are in the continent. So ideally, we've kind of seen products that are highly focused to the needs of the continent, but also looking at products that tend to address the issues around value chain. So we've seen B2B2C types of InsurTechs that tend now to plug to the incumbent companies and connect them to the customers in a more seamless manner. It's kind of increasing the distribution of insurance solutions across the continent. So ideally, there are various components that are trying to solve the predominant needs of the continent, but also just trying to improve the business models across the insurance ecosystem by really trying to help the incumbent companies to provide solutions that are quite seamless, easy to purchase, but also just ensuring that customers are also getting the equal chance of the bargain, whereby they kind of are able to receive their claims as quickly as possible. So ideally, there are different varieties of solutions. There are different companies that are trying to tackle this change, and we are likely going to see a lot of evolution around the InsurTechs, particularly by use of machine learning and AI to kind of ensure that even in terms of the risk assessment and in terms of the risk profiles, can they be done on the real time for these particular persons to really get those solutions that speak to their own profile. So more to come, but already we've seen a couple of good solutions are trying to be part of solving the problem that we are currently experiencing in the continent.
Thank you. That was very, very insightful. So thank you, Elias. Now we got your perspective from what you're seeing, right? As I said, at the macro level. Now we'd like to bring on the entrepreneurs to say how their solution that they're bringing to the market is looking to pretty much innovate and enhance the efficiency and increase the insurance penetration. So I'll bring on Teva right now to tell us how his solution at WiAssur is essentially enhancing and helping insurance progress across the continent. So Teva, the stage is yours. Can you hear us?
As just said, I think the most innovative solutions or more effective ones on the continent have been concentrated on the distribution of insurance products. So at WiAssur, for example, we have rebuilt the entire process from ground up to make insurance easier and quicker than ever before. Customers can get a quote in a few seconds, everything online. They can sign up instantaneously. They have a fully digital insurance experience from sign up all the way to claims filing. Others have built solutions that can be used by advisors or brokers, but also consumer-facing businesses that want to expand their offering into insurance products. So I think we are changing at WiAssur the landscape of insurance by bringing more transparency, speed, but also clarity in the distribution.
Fantastic. I like that. Amazing. Thank you, Teva. I will bring on Tunde to hear how he is doing it at Hadiel. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And I'll bring you back later, Teva. Thank you. All right, Tunde.
Thanks, Anthony. That's fine. Okay, so I think very great nuggets shared by Elias and Teva there. Just to share my own perspective, I would say from a macro to micro perspective, I think one of the critical things that we're beginning to see. Okay, so let me speak from our lenses, right? Is the fact that business models are peculiar, to our environments, right? So we live in a very different environment, and Africa is not homogeneous. It's a very large landscape, and even within the West, Teva will attest to that. There are different things that regulatory-wise are different, despite the fact that you could have countries like Nigeria and Ivory Coast on the West, and then when we go to Elias's side, it's completely different. But what is universal, either ways, to whether you're the West, East, North, or South, is the fact that when you look at the consumer landscape and you start to look at the critical areas, the 5 Ps, right? The psychographics of the consumer, the actual pain points, the persona, pricing, and then also, let me say, the perception, right? You start to see that you're bringing the consumer, you're transitioning from a traditional business model to a consumer-led product model, right? Wherein the customer is at the center of all your iterations and the kind of innovation you're trying to unlock or birth. And what that does is, when you start to consider those areas, you also want to look at very critical indices from the demographic perspective, right? And what that will show you is that, there's so many different trends that are being unlocked in our environments generally that might not necessarily be the same as soon as you step outside of Africa. So for instance, we are building things that have to revolve around, buy now, pay later features, right? For things that have to do with little pockets of protection here and there, right? Because when you go back to the consumer again, what are the things that are pertinent? So you could say that affordability is an issue, which is true, given the economic indices of the environment. You could say accessibility is an issue. But by and large, there are other issues that are silently burning at the back of the consumer's mind. Trust deficits is one of the major things, right? That is a major, major issue. So when you talk about 3% for a continent that accounts for close to 16% of the global population, that's a small figure, right? So what is largely responsible? And you see the informal sector is driving majority of the continent. And so when you look at the informal sector already, the trust deficit is huge. The second thing is the product irrelevance, right? So you can't tell, your gig worker or someone who is an artisan to come and lock down premiums upfront for 12 months. It's just not going to do it, even if he has the money, right? Because the first thing that comes to his mind is you're going to scam him, right? So one of the things that I think is very pertinent is, looking at the trends that can really unlock millions of policies within 2023 and 2030, right, where we're going to have other significant changes on a continental perspective, right? And those trends that we're seeing are the usage-based trends, the pay-as-you-use ecosystems, the rising of sharing economies, buy now, pay later. There are other derivatives of that: spend now, pay later, buy later, save now, pay later. Those kind of derivatives. I'm really looking at those models, to tap into what the consumer is going to use to actually take up protection services, right? I'll stop there.
Yeah, and this once again is a perfect segue to really what we're looking to talk about next, right? Because you already hinted to regulation and innovation and policies. So the next question here is really, what regulatory challenges do insurance technology companies face in Africa today? Do you think, as an entrepreneur and as a founder of a company that is looking to solve and to help increase penetration of insurance in Africa, how can you navigate with these regulatory challenges? I know you mentioned there's some policies that are coming with currently. How do you navigate that? And I know every country is different, so we'll start with your take across Nigeria, and then we have Côte d'Ivoire with Teva, and then we have Elias who can tell us a little bit about Kenya and perhaps other African countries as well.
All right, super. So, I mean, to share context of that, I think it's one of the things that has really happened, which was a disadvantage globally, but came with its perks, was the COVID, right? And, after post-COVID, right, there's been a lot of birthing of different platforms, like Elias mentioned, the Bima Lab, which is doing fantastic work, by the way, with, a very large handful of regulators across different regions. And what we're beginning to see is that even the regulators, post COVID, are starting to look inwards to see what are the digital policies, what are the digital frameworks that can be birthed. Case in hand, in Nigeria, there were different policies that were enacted last year. One had to do with microinsurance, the other one skips me right now, but there were two major things that, was put publicly for everyone to chime in and see, stakeholders and experts to see how, these policies can help to redefine the ecosystem, considering, the drastic changes that have happened, because you look at policies, not only in Nigeria for that matter, across the different regions, that say X, Y, Z, but in the consumer framework of today, it's just not applicable, right? And so one of the things that we are seeing is the fact that there's so many solutions, business models that are not necessarily the conventional business model that will tour along the lines of insurance, but they can be a feedway or a feed-in as to how, the whole insurance ecosystem can unlock larger policies, unlock better coverage, and particularly tilting towards the region of risk and resilience management, because that's the ultimate where, there's a balanced ecosystem. And with that, we particularly have been able to see different models where it's not, sidelined by insurance regulation per se. The reason is because, with the advent of the ecosystems that are being grown and catalyzed by the likes of the Bima Lab and FSD, most of the regulators are also looking at having those digital frameworks completely separate and creating sandboxes that can pull in, innovators so that they can test the waters with real customers, take back things back home and say, okay, this is what's going to happen. And I think there's, even across sub-Saharan Africa, there's been different policies that are evolving. That I know for Kenya, for instance, there's already a solidified framework as to what happens, if you're an InsurTech, your capitalization shares, etc., etc. And those kind of things are just, snowballing across the likes of the West Coast, Nigeria, etc.
Yes, no, thank you for touching on that. So there are some regulatory. What I'm taking from this is there are some regulatory enhancements that are looking to be done. In Nigeria specifically, there's been some microinsurance progress and policies around that. And and the other piece that you touched on is just there are these governments are more and more building sandboxes to be able to test these solutions before they really open it up to deciding on whether giving license. So to better understand how these InsurTech companies work and operate, putting them in a sandbox, and then eventually down the line deciding how to build a framework around that, if I got that correctly. And that is also happening across other industries such as fintech. There's many innovation in the investment space that is also taking place where regulatory
Absolutely.
are moving forward with sandboxes. Great, thank you, Tunde, for your point of view. I'll bring on Teva really quickly to touch on his take on: are there any major challenge that you're facing when it comes to the regulatory framework in Côte d'Ivoire? Perhaps can you touch and tell us a little bit how things are going in that part of Africa?
Yeah, so in Côte d'Ivoire, I don't think regulation is a barrier. I think public authorities understand that in order to have sustainable development, not just insurance, but global development, there's a need for population, companies, and their assets to be covered as uncertainty grows. I've seen in some countries that insurance commissions are implementing very strict adherence to the prompt payment of claims and inspection of insurance company. I think this is to improve the customer perception of insurance and its image, and for me, in conclusion, increases customer satisfaction. Just so to conclude, I'd say compliance in Africa enables maybe good practices, internal control, and risk management, and like Tunde said, I think a better resilience from different companies.
Got it. So there's no really sandbox or anything like that have been put in place in Côte d'Ivoire for InsurTech companies to innovate. It's pretty much free to really innovate and come up with innovative solution to distribute insurance products.
I think that there has been in Côte d'Ivoire major changes. A few months ago, in January, the regulation allowed insurance to distribute digital automobile certificates. So since a few months now, we don't have any paper certificates. So they have been equipping police and customs to control the effectiveness of any insurance policies on automobile. So we're really looking at digitization of the whole process now, and that has been incepted by regulation and public authorities with private companies, private brokers, distributors, and also insurance companies. So this is why I'd say today the updates and how the market is doing in Côte d'Ivoire is really not a barrier to digital technology companies in the insurance sector.
Thank you, Teva, for your precious nuggets here for those looking to innovate in Côte d'Ivoire and better understanding the current landscape and innovation with the regulatory framework that is taking place. With that being said, I'll bring Elias to also share his thoughts. I know he's deep into the regulatory and compliance work that's going on for, like I said, democratizing insurance in Africa. So, Elias, I would love to hear your take on this.
Yeah, thanks. So ideally, when we talk about challenges, I know most of the time people don't like regulators. It's surprising that Teva and Tunde like regulators, and I'm so happy. There's a big shift of the image of a regulator. So ideally, when we talk about regulatory challenges, the key thing that comes in mind is what is the regulator's mandate. And they tend not to be loved most of the time, but if you look at why they exist, is that they want to ensure there is a balanced playing ground in terms of ensuring that there is no market failures or systemic risks that would impact the financial ecosystem. And with that in mind, they tend to kind of focus more on consumer protection and on prudential requirements in terms of just ensuring that, yeah, we kind of protect whatever that we already have. But over time, we've seen a shift in terms of the role of a regulator. In terms of now, we've seen now regulators kind of taking up market development mandates. So more of an evolution from a consumer-focused way of protection to more of like, what else can we basically do to the market environment in terms of, can we enable new players to come in, and can we enable them to have a market that they can test their solutions over and above what they're currently doing. And with that, we've seen a big evolution in terms of regulations, whereby now regulators are kind of also focusing on the market development role, whereby they're looking at enabling different players to get into the financial system by enabling them to bring innovative solutions that tend to address the challenges that are currently existing in markets such as the insurance markets. And over time, there are two compelling elements that we kind of think about regulatory challenges. And one of the things is that, yeah, there's some regulations that are quite restrictive that needs change. And we've seen a more elaborate review of those particular regulations from a more of a compliance-based kind of regulations to what we call principle-based. So whereby they are kind of focusing on what are the principles behind these particular solutions. Can we basically develop an oversight mechanism to check on this so that in case it might cause a market ecosystem issue, we can be able to respond to it more proactively and quickly before it becomes entrenched. To that particular point, whereby there's need also of regulatory clarity. So for instance, some of the things that are not happening in the market is because the innovators and the InsurTechs don't know what these regulations entail. So in terms of even just providing regulatory clarity for them to understand, these are the regulations that are there. This is how you can work with these particular regulations that are already in place. And in case there's need for change, then we provide that an element of change. So we've been running programs such as Bima Lab that kind of brings all this ecosystem together. How can we bring the regulator in the play for him to understand? Because some of the ideas are not really approved, because some of the regulators just lack the understanding of what InsurTechs are trying to do. So if you bring the regulators at the table, whereby they can be able to start understanding, learning, and seeing the trends that are happening within the current financial system, then they can think about what are these regulations that we need to change, and how then can we also provide regulatory clarity for these people to understand what we are expecting them to do. And that kind of created a big shift within the market ecosystem. Now, also, there's need to do what we call capacity building and peer-to-peer learning amongst the regulators, enabling the regulators to also develop technologies that will enable them to address these particular issues on the real time. So I know most of us have heard about uptake, supervisory technology, that various regulators across the continent are already implementing these types of solutions just to assist and enable them provide and navigate, enable the regulated entities to navigate these challenges that are currently exposed to them. So there's need to continually build capacity within the regulators to enable them to understand the risks. There's need for the regulators to provide regulatory clarity to the InsurTechs, but also enable to create tools such as test and learn, regulatory sandboxes, and some letters of authorization, because there's no one way to solve the regulatory challenges. It must be proportionate and fit for purpose for each and every risk that these particular innovators are trying to bring to the market. So I wouldn't say that this is the silver bullet around regulations. We just need to keep on looking at proportionate and fit for purpose regulations within the threshold of really ensuring that, again, we don't cause systemic effects or risks to the market to just kill the confidentiality and the well-being of the insurance sector or any financial system that has been put in place by these particular regulators.
Fantastic. Thank you for that elaborate response, Elias. So really what is important, the main takeaways is here is, more and more startups are looking to collaborate with regulators on the one hand. On the other hand, regulators are more and more looking to understand how these technologies, how the InsurTech technologies work, right? That's part of their needs in order to be able to access the insurance penetration on the continent. Because if they don't understand it, there will be this feeling of distrust. And because there's a feeling of distrust, then there's not the willing to collaborate because distrust and not understanding how the InsurTech companies are addressing the problem. That's number one. Number two, there needs to be a clear regulatory framework that is provided to these InsurTechs for them to understand what they can and they cannot do, right? Because they have to play within those rules to respect and to make sure that nothing major happens. And last but not least, there needs to be also, both from the regulatory side, a way to push for more sandbox, for more testing, giving those letters of, you mentioned letter of authorization, allowing these startups to test out these different solutions before they go mainstream and they give and provide different licenses. So I hope I summarized what you mentioned. So I know we're getting up on time. There's just two more points that I really would like to touch on. And next one, I just want a yes or no, and perhaps a 1 or 2 sentence at most on it, which I know is hard, but this is it. So really quickly, in 30 seconds, yes or no, and perhaps why. So the question is, existing distribution channels are partly responsible for the low insurance penetration. Do you think going digital or digitizing distribution is enough to drive uptake?
I think no. I kind of mentioned that we might need to think about the entire insurance distribution, insurance value chain, because there are different elements within the value chain that needs to be solved. So I think we need to do more rather than just looking at distribution, digitizing distribution. Yep.
Amazing. I'm going to bring Teva and ask him the same question. Teva, I kind of imagine what your answer is here.
No, I agree with Elias. Okay. I think it's maybe no, but it's just the first step. It's the first step. And like I said, I think digitizing distribution will allow reachability and reducing costs, but InsurTechs will have to look at the whole value chain of insurance to drive uptake.
Amazing. Thank you, Teva. And I'll come back to you in a minute. And let's hear it from Tunde. Tunde, what are your takes on this? Yes or no? And in 30 seconds, what you have to say on this?
So it's an absolutely not for me.
All right. We have
and the reason is because the DNA of the environment, right? There's a lot of inherent deep-rooted problems that are wired into how people access their daily financial needs and services, right? And so the distribution channel is just one small portion of it. But what about the other issues, right? And those issues have to be addressed. If those issues are not addressed, digitization is going to do a lot. It's going to unlock a lot of value chain. It's going to open a lot of buckets. But those issues need to be addressed, which is part of what we're doing. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you. And now I'll bring all of you on stage. The idea here and now is to open it up a little bit for some question and answers. So we've gotten quite a bit of questions. So the first one was brought to us by Steven. And I don't know if anyone here has more details, but can you share some more details on market and growth numbers for health insurance in particular?
Yeah, I can. So I can talk for Côte d'Ivoire and some Francophone Africa. So health insurance has shown the biggest growth year on year for close to 15, 17%. And this is because I think this is mainly because health portfolios are managed by third-party administrator, and that we're able to operate thanks to cloud computing and APIs. So yeah, to keep it very brief, I think it is the fastest growing insurance branch, and this is because of, for me, cloud computing in West Africa.
Yeah, just also to add, if you look at the general genesis and the general outlook of the insurance sector in Africa, there are two major lines of business: motor, and next to it is health. And that kind of shows that particular branch of insurance is highly appreciated in the continent, because again, the needs for getting better products and health solutions is important within the continent. Generally, I've seen if motor takes around 40% or 30% of the insurance market in a particular country, then you'll get that health will take an equivalent of that. So around 30 to 20 to 30 percent of that particular business again becomes health. So it's something that is growing. It keeps on growing in the continent, but also we really need to keep on creating rightful solutions that will still resonate to the needs of people within the continent. Because again, there are so many other competing solutions that most of people within the continent are going for that might be solved through provision of health insurance solutions and so forth.
Thank you, Elias. And I don't know if, Tunde, you have anything else you want to add around the growth numbers in the health insurance, perhaps in your market?
So I think Teva and Elias have shared good context on it already. The only thing that I will say is if we look at it from the continent's perspective, statistically, as of 2020, the data that was out there was that 1/8 of the GWP, right, will be apportionable to health, right? So when we look at 1/8 of that, of the 68 billion proposed gross written premium, right, that comes to somewhere around the region of 8.5 or $8 billion US, which is huge, right? The problem inherently there is just that different strokes for different parts of the continent. So for instance, in Nigeria, you have more of corporate-based health insurance. Let me not put it that way. Now, what do I mean by that? So the system has been built over time to accommodate the corporate sector, that's the formal sector, people who are gainfully employed. Now, but when you look at the unemployment rates, which is consistently rising, and the informal sector that accounts for the larger parts of the economy, right? That population is largely excluded. And so what we're beginning to see is a transition where, there are some solutions that are arising that are bridging that gap and covering individuals, communities, households, artisans. Part of it is what we're trying to do as well, and what we're currently doing. And with that, before 2030, you're probably going to have a very large dynamics, particularly when we look at this change in the demographic shifts, right? Where you're going to have people who are currently classified as Generation X, they'll be retired by 2030, right? And you're going to have overall statistically 100 million people who are currently gainfully employed. They'll be retired by 2030. And then the people who are not eligible to vote yet, who are 18 by that time, are going to flood the workforce. And statistically, it's going to be about 222 million people in Africa. So when you look at those numbers, what now that creates is it creates an opportunity for new derivatives of products, right, that will be health inclined. The shifts will also happen in terms of changing from scope, the kind of benefits that will be available, and how will digital play a role, in accentuating that coverage. So it will still go on an upward trajectory. I think the only thing that's slowing it down at the moment, the growth is there, it's going, but it's not as fast as we would love to see it grow. But definitely, yes, it is an area that, we should be looking at very rapid growth.
Amazing. So we'll just take one or two more questions before we wrap it up. Thank you, everybody, for staying a little longer. This, I think, I can give a pretty brief answer to this. is have we had InsurTech distributing life insurance products?
That's correct. Yes. So I can attest to, for instance, there's a guy who's doing some fantastic work off the top of my head. It's called One Spark. They are bringing out the concept of on-demand life insurance. Some very deep underwriting and contextual technology to accentuate that. They're based in South Africa. They're doing amazing work, and yeah, that kind of model is just something that we should be seeing being developed locally. And the interesting bit about it is that particular company is already trying to export the services and solutions outside the continent, which is kind of like what we want to see happen over the next 3 to 5 years, where we're not only building ingrained local solutions, but we're building global solutions that can be exported, to create, different shifts even in other climes.
Amazing. Anyone else wants to add on this? If not, I'll jump.
Yeah, I've also seen a few insurtechs on life insurance distributing with APIs through telco companies in Ghana with MTN, in South Africa, in Kenya also, and in Cote d'Ivoire. So yeah, we've had it, or we have on the continent, I think, a few insurtechs distributing life insurance.
Amazing. And it's funny, you just touched on telcos, and someone just asked, we all love what M-Pesa is doing with payments. We can do the work in the insurance industry. As a question, I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think this basically kind of presents a more of a partnership, because when how M-Pesa started in Kenya, it was quite a challenge when somebody was told, like, yeah, your money will be on your phone. So you give somebody your money at a kiosk or at an outlet, and then the next thing is tells you that now your money is on your phone, which basically means that you could basically trust that particular person, that I give you hard cash and you send me digital cash on my phone, that I can basically go and use it on other things within the value chain. So ideally, what we see is that with that particular trust created, and with this being a very good platform for distribution, it can really create a very key element to unlock not only insurance distribution, but also improve trust. And we've seen a number of companies integrating their insurance platforms to the M-Pesa. InsurTechs have been using this particular payment platform to really connect with their solutions, because it has become a single most trusted form of transfer of money and such kind of things, and you can use this to purchase. So I think, yeah, these are some of the key elements that institution might need to partner with, and really enable their customers also to get added solutions outside what M-Pesa does. So can you purchase insurance? Can your claims be paid through insurance, and so forth? And that is something that we've seen happening within Kenya. In fact, it's stated that over close to over 15% of the GDP is now driven entirely by mobile money in Kenya.
To add a point just on if we can have insurance kiosk, I think you can. We do in Cote d'Ivoire to collect premiums, but I think insurance, like you said, Elias, at the beginning, there's a lack of understanding of populations on how an insurance product work, and I don't think having a kiosk for a first time sale is something that can work. But yes, to collect premiums and just to keep on onboarded clients in your system, I think it can be a solution.
Amazing. Thank you. I don't know, Tunde, if you want to add anything. Otherwise, we are getting closer to the end, and I want to be mindful of everyone's time here. One thing I want to ask, and this I hope is going to answer also your question, Joseph, because Joseph asked how would you gauge the interest of investors and funders toward the African insurtech markets. So I'm gonna bring that question into my next question. So there's two questions for each of you. The first one is, to wrap it up. The first one is, we mentioned that the insurance penetration in Africa is 3% this year. What would it be like in the next 10 years? What is the number going to look like in 10 years from now? So curious on hearing your number on that. If you can call, if it's just going to be single digit, double digits, would love to hear your take on that. And number two, what would be your advice for entrepreneurs that are looking to innovate in the InsurTech space in Africa? So I don't know who wants to take it first.
Okay. So if I could just jump in there, I think in terms of the first question, over the next 10 years, we did some work last year with the former Andrew Johnston, which is now known as Gallagher. Yes, I was trying to remember the name of the old former company. It was called Willis Towers, right? And part of the permutations and the projections we did, which we released in that report, was that, you know, we should have something along the region of about 12% to 16%, you know, that wide conservative variable, right, over the next 7 years, by 2030 specifically, in terms of penetration. Why? Because the models that are being tossed into the environment based on the emerging trends, we've seen some of those things create massive leapfrogs in places that have similar, should I say, eco-demographic statistics like Africa, the likes of Southeast Asia, the likes of Latin America as well. And statistically, Africa is poised to be the second fastest growing region insurance-wise after Latin America. So when we look at that level of growth, what we're going to see is, because models that we would love to see, like the likes of Grab Financial, what they've done in Malaysia very succinctly, where within a space of 3 years, they are unlocking 100 million policies, right? If we're able to continue with the heavy lifting, which a lot of innovation is bringing to the continent, like I normally say, just about 10 years ago, if you wanted to do a website, something basic, you know, you had to outsource to places like Israel, India, and the US, right? But that's like next level kindergarten stuff now for the African environment, because there's been a very massive influx of developers, coders, engineers, you know, who are able to do a lot of heavy lifting in terms of coding and writing programs. So what is going to traditionally flow with that surge is the fact that we're going to have more business models that will be able to unlock very rapidly, you know, policies, as opposed to what has happened in the past 20 years combined together, right? It's only because of the advent of technology. And we say that conservatively, when we have that kind of influx of business models that are attributable to the environment, particularly putting the consumer, transitioning to a consumer-led model, then we'll start to have a lot of rapid growth within that insurance sector. Particularly when we look at, it's not difficult to look at how that trend can naturally follow. If we look at what has happened in the fintech space, combined together within the past 5 years in Africa, right? This space as a financial service, insurance being a financial service, is only poised for that growth, all things working well. Yeah, so that would answer that would answer the first question. The second one, sorry, that eludes me. What was your second question?
Yeah, second one is more so, and I guess you can also add that, is to, what would be your advice for founders looking to innovate in the InsurTech space? And perhaps if you can add something around the interest of investors investing into this space in Africa, that would be fantastic.
Okay. So I would say, I think because I'm in a position where I wear two kind of like different hats, the other hat, which I probably didn't mention, was sort of like a deep research work that we do with a couple of companies, particularly within the insurance space. I think it has to do with, first of all, coming into it from a mission-driven perspective of wanting to create a different environment and creating a dent on the continent. The reason why I say so is because when we look at the rates in terms of inclusion, if we just even skip everything that has to do with insurance particularly, this is a major, when we look at the wealth management ladder, insurance is one of the critical things that would help to protect and unlock wealth, right? And so there has to be some form of genuine mission. I wouldn't say passion because that's a different thing entirely. So I think the mission has to be clear, as to what such a founder or an innovator would be wanting to try to achieve within the insurance industry, right? Bringing technology into it. That's the very first thing. Now, while I would say on the subsequent question that you asked in terms of what is the appetite of investors, I would want to say it's bullish, right? Bullish because we've seen trends shift things, particularly starting from 2021 and 2022, where we're seeing a couple of investors who I wouldn't, want to mention them on this platform, who are investing in African InsurTechs for the very first time. That happened last year specifically, right? Investors who are niched down to insurance solutions and everything. And two people in particular who invested in one of the companies that is well known to us on this call, that's Lamy. That's the first time they were ever going to even invest in Africa. And aside from that, there's a crop of different, should I say, I don't want to say LPs, so let me just stick to investment-driven interests that are spewing around the space, particularly because of the possible populations and the demographics that Africa can unlock. But the problem still inherently there is the fact that usually external, when we look at investors that are not African-based and investors that are locally based, there's always usually that contention of, do I have someone who is going to hedge the risk with me, which is another conversation for another day, right? But definitely, I would summarize and say, I think it's quite bullish at the moment, which is a positive thing. And it can only get better so long as we continue to show heavy innovation around the existing business models. Stop there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tunde. Question to you, Teva. Now we are at 3% penetration. What's your guess in the next 10 years?
Well, I think penetration will not change because of how the economy is booming in Francophone Africa. So I think we'll stay that way, although we have, I think last year, close to 17-18% of growth of insurance premiums in Côte d'Ivoire, but we have a 13% growth of GDP. So that's for the insurance. And the thing I wanted also to answer is about the opportunities for new players. I think there's a lot of opportunity for startups that come in insurance sector are the ones that will address business process challenges for the insurance companies. Because I think the same thing for Tunde, but as an insurance distributors, there's not a day where I don't see huge lacks of efficiency in honestly all the insurance companies I meet. And I think to uptake the penetration rate, it will take new players, but also incumbent players and the traditional companies, because they have the resilience today to face shocks.
All right, good. So for those looking to innovate in the insurance, Teva has one way to go about it, at least in his market, which is focusing on business process challenges. Thank you, Teva. And to wrap us up.
Yeah. So So I think in terms of penetration, one thing that we really need to work as a continent is how then do we take it above the world average of around 7%, and that should be possible because there are a couple of issues that we kind of see coming within the continent. The population on average is around 19 years of age at the median. That basically means that if we could really look at how then we provide solutions that do resonate to these people needs, then we will be able to transition the insurance sector towards the world average of around 7%. Also, if you look at various risk transfer mechanisms that are currently being adopted in the continent. There's need also to formalize those informal risk transfer mechanisms. So how then can the insurance sector try and increase efficiencies on what are the current practices that the continent, different elements of the continent are using to manage the risk that they do face. So I think there's work that needs to be done around formalization of informal risk transfer mechanisms through basically indicating how insurance can be an effective means of really taking care of those types of needs, but also just to allow technology to kind of play an important aspect of enabling the population, the business models, and also to build the trust. I foresee most people having more knowledge on what insurance entails. Is something that was not there in the past. This particular product was seen as something that was quite complex and only for the rich people in the continent. And that basically means that as we kind of go through the evolution of really enabling and creating a bridge for easy understanding of some of these solutions, and we'll get more people within the financial inclusion agenda. Now, over and above that, then we've seen the role of the government, because again, insurance will not be done solely through the micro level. We need also to look at the meso level in terms of bringing various institutions, and also the macro level, whereby again we look at how then risks can be managed also at the macro level. So it's an all concerted effort that needs to be aligned to apply that leverage that will kind of push insurance penetration from the less than 3% towards the world average of around 7%, and that's something that once we get there, then we can ideally get to the trajectory. On the second question, what do we foresee within the innovators and the founders? There's a little bit of appreciation of what is happening within the InsurTech ecosystem in terms of really these InsurTechs starting to show impact within the continent. And that basically creates a lot of confidence, not only to the funders and the investors, but also within the market ecosystem. I see not only really attracting funding from foreign funders and investors. We want to get to that level whereby even the African investors will have confidence in investing within the insurance space. Because if you look at the insurance product, it becomes an asset management tool that can really improve economies and ensure that it kind of leads to economic growth, not only of a country, but also of this particular continent. So ideally, what I foresee is that as we kind of generate a lot of trust and a lot of confidence within the InsurTech ecosystem, attracting foreign investors to basically put their money, we are also going to create an opportunity whereby we'll see local investors kind of also seeing the opportunity around this particular sector. Over and above that, we need to continue working within the insurance ecosystem. That means that we need to ensure that investors have a clear sight of where the continent is headed. We need to ensure that the regulator provides and creates an enabling market environment for these particular solutions to work. We need to ensure that the industry also provides clear strategic partnership opportunities for these particular solutions to get to the market, but also just enabling the innovators to continually not only look at the business preservation, their business models as a fundraising opportunity, but more of an opportunity to create resilience among the content. So whereby we might see the InsurTechs and the innovators moving out of more of a fundraising strategy to a more of a sustainability, impact-led strategies that really transform their business models, that are going to attract the types of investors that I've kind of mentioned in my previous comment. So I think Africa is ready. We need to keep working as a team, bring all these ecosystem players together, and basically see the opportunity that really sits for the future of insurance in this continent. Thank you.
Amazing. I think this really wraps it up. I want to thank Tunde, Elias, and Teva for taking some of their precious time today to teach us, share their insights and knowledge about the InsurTech space in Africa and how InsurTech is accelerating the growth of the insurance penetration on the continent. So really thank you, everybody. Thank you for the ones who have attended us. Perhaps just want to share here that if you're looking to access a little bit more in a report that we've put together for you about InsurTech, just feel free to scan it on the QR code there and you'll be able to access it for free. Once again, thank you, everybody. And I wish you all a good rest of your day or evenings.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony, and everybody.